The heavy oak doors close behind us with that familiar thud that echoes through centuries of history. Can you hear it? That deep, resonant sound that tells us we're now alone with some of humanity's greatest treasures. The security guard's footsteps are fading down the corridor, and his keys jingle one last time before silence settles over this sacred space. Welcome to the Louvre after hours. I'm your curator tonight, and for the next 3 hours, these halls belong just to us. No crowds pushing past Mona Lisa's smile, no tour groups rushing through the Egyptian wing, no children's voices echoing off the marble floors. Just you, me, and the whispered secrets that these walls have been holding for over 2 centuries. Take a deep breath. Smell that. It's the scent of old wood, conservation chemicals, and something indefinable. Perhaps it's the weight of time itself pressed into these stones. The air conditioning hums softly, maintaining the perfect climate for these priceless works. And somewhere in the distance, you can hear the almost imperceptible tick of the environmental monitoring systems that never sleep. Tonight, I want to take you on a journey. Not the rushed, harried tour that most visitors experience, but a slow, intimate conversation with art that has waited centuries for this moment of quiet communion. We'll move at the pace of contemplation, stopping where beauty demands we pause, lingering where mystery beckons us closer. The lights are dimmed for conservation, casting everything in a golden twilight that makes the paintings seem to glow from within. This is how I prefer to see them, how they were meant to be seen, in the soft light of evening, when the harsh fluorescents are dimmed and the artwork can breathe again. Our footsteps echo softly as we enter the Grande Galerie, stretching nearly half a kilometer before us, like a river of art flowing through time. Listen to that echo. It's the same sound that Leonardo da Vinci heard when he walked these halls as a guest of King Francis I. The same echo that Delacroix heard when he came to study the masters. The same echo that countless artists, scholars, and dreamers have added to over the centuries. The parquet floor beneath our feet was laid in the 17th century, each piece of wood chosen and placed by craftsmen whose names history has forgotten, but whose work still cradles our steps tonight. Feel how solid it is, how each footfall connects us to everyone who has walked this path before us. We're approaching the first painting now, and I want you to prepare yourself for something remarkable. In the daytime, this gallery bustles with thousands of visitors, but now, in this hushed twilight, each painting seems to wake up, to stretch and breathe and remember what it was like when it first emerged from its creator's studio. Here, on our right, is Géricault's The Raft of the Medusa. In the soft evening light, you can see how the figures seem to move, how the muscles strain against the canvas, how hope and despair dance together in brushstrokes that took months to perfect. The painting is enormous, nearly 500 square meters of human drama, rendered in oil and passion. Stand here with me for a moment. Look at the figure at the top of the composition, the young man waving the cloth toward the distant ship. Géricault used real survivors of the Medusa shipwreck as his models. The man you're looking at actually lived through 13 days on a makeshift raft, watching his companions die one by one. When Géricault painted his face, he was capturing not just the hope of potential rescue, but the memory of unimaginable suffering. The silence here is profound. No rustling of guidebook pages, no flash photography, no tour guide speaking through a microphone. Just us and this masterpiece, and the weight of the stories it holds. Let's continue down the gallery. Our footsteps create a rhythm, a meditation in motion, left foot, right foot, each step carrying us deeper into this conversation with the centuries past. The paintings watch us pass, and I sometimes wonder if they remember all the faces that have gazed upon them, all the tears that have been shed before them, all the moments of recognition and wonder they have witnessed. Here's something I want you to try. As we walk, let your eyes unfocus slightly. Let the paintings blur into impressions of color and movement. This is how the gallery would have looked to someone in the 19th century, when gas lamps flickered and shadows danced across the walls. The sharp, artificial lighting of our modern age strips away some of the mystery that these works were meant to hold. We're turning now into the Italian wing, and the very air seems to change. There's a warmth here, a golden quality that has nothing to do with the lighting and everything to do with the passion that flows from these canvases. The Italian Renaissance, when art awakened from the long dream of the Middle Ages and remembered what it meant to celebrate human beauty, human emotion, human divine spark. Our footsteps are softer here on the marble floors. Listen to how different they sound, more formal, more reverent somehow. We're walking on stones that were quarried from the same hills where Michelangelo found his marble, where Leonardo collected pigments for his paints, and here she is, the woman who needs no introduction, who has launched 1,000 theories and captured 1,000,000,000 imaginations. La Gioconda, the Mona Lisa. In the daytime, she's surrounded by crowds, protected behind bulletproof glass, photographed by flash cameras until the light reflects off her surface like water. But now, in this gentle evening glow, you can see her as Leonardo intended. The sfumato technique he perfected creates those soft, almost imperceptible transitions between colors and tones, giving her face that quality of being almost alive, almost breathing. I want you to look at her hands. Everyone focuses on her smile, but Leonardo spent equal care on those hands, folded so elegantly, so naturally. Those are the hands of a woman who has never done manual labor, hands that have been cared for and pampered. But look closer. See how the light catches the slight translucency of the skin. Leonardo understood that light doesn't just fall on objects. It penetrates them, becomes part of them. The silence around her portrait is different from the silence elsewhere in the museum. It's expectant, waiting, as if she's been holding her breath for 5 centuries, waiting for someone to truly see her, to understand what Leonardo was trying to capture in those layers of translucent glazes. Stand here with me for a few minutes. Just look at her, not thinking about her fame, not wondering about her identity, just receiving what she has to offer. The longer you look, the more you'll see. The way her eyes seem to shift and follow you. The way her expression changes depending on your mood, your angle of viewing, even your height. Leonardo worked on this painting for over 4 years, carrying it with him from Italy to France, never quite considering it finished. In the evening light like this, you can understand why. She seems to exist in a perpetual state of becoming, always on the verge of speaking, of revealing her secrets. The frame around her is from the 19th century, but it follows Renaissance proportions. The golden rectangle that contains her portrait follows mathematical principles that Leonardo understood intuitively. The same proportions found in seashells and flower petals and the spiral of galaxies. Beauty, he knew, wasn't accidental. We're leaving the Renaissance now, our footsteps carrying us back through time, back to an age when art served different gods, different dreams. The Egyptian wing of the Louvre holds treasures that were ancient when Rome was young, works of art that were created to last forever, and have succeeded beyond their makers' wildest dreams. The lighting here is even more subdued, protective of these fragile artifacts that have survived floods and wars and the simple passage of millennia. Our footsteps echo differently here, creating a rhythm that feels almost ritualistic, almost ceremonial. We're walking through a graveyard of civilizations, but also through a testament to the human desire to create, to leave something beautiful behind when we're gone. Here's the Great Sphinx of Tanis, nearly 5,000 years old. Run your eyes along its surface. See how the pink granite has been polished to a mirror finish by craftsmen whose tools were copper and stone, whose only power was human muscle and infinite patience. 5,000 years. Try to let that number settle in your mind. When this Sphinx was carved, Stonehenge was still under construction. The Great Wall of China wouldn't exist for another 3,000 years. The Sphinx gazes past us with those enormous eyes, and I always wonder what it's seeing. What would 5 millennia of human history look like from this perspective? What would it think of our hurried modern lives, our digital distractions, our shortened attention spans? Move closer to the hieroglyphics on the base. Each symbol was carved by hand, each one carrying meaning that we're only beginning to understand again after centuries of being a lost language. These aren't just decorative patterns. They're prayers, spells, eternal contracts between the living and the dead. They speak of journeys through the underworld, of weighed hearts and eternal judgment, of a civilization that saw death not as an ending but as a transformation. The silence here is profound, almost sacred. In the darkness beyond our small pool of light, other statues and sarcophagi wait in patient dignity, guardians of secrets that may never be fully revealed. There's something about Egyptian art that demands stillness, contemplation. These pieces weren't created for museums. They were created for eternity, and they carry that weight, that infinite patience. Here's something remarkable. This small statue of a scribe, cross-legged and alert, ready to take dictation from a pharaoh who has been dust for 4,000 years. Look at his eyes. They're inlaid with crystal and seem almost alive in this soft light. The sculptor who created this figure knew that art could conquer death, could preserve not just the appearance, but the essential aliveness of his subject. The scribe's hands rest on a papyrus scroll, and if you look closely, you can see that his fingers are positioned as if he's actually holding a reed pen. 4,000 years ago, someone sat for this portrait, someone who could read and write in a world where such skills were rarer than gold. And now he sits here in eternal readiness, waiting for a pharaoh's call that will never come. Our journey continues now into the sculpture galleries, where three-dimensional dreams wait in patient marble silence. The acoustics here are different. Our footsteps don't echo so much as resonate, bouncing off curved marble surfaces and polished bronze to create a symphony of movement through space. Sculpture is perhaps the most honest of all art forms. A painting can lie, can show us things that never existed, but sculpture must obey the laws of physics, must support its own weight, must exist in our world on our terms. And yet, the greatest sculptors have always managed to make stone seem to breathe, to make marble pulse with life. Here is Michelangelo's Dying Slave, and I want you to approach it slowly, Let your eyes adjust to its presence before we talk about what you're seeing. The figure is life-sized, carved from a single block of Carrara marble, but Michelangelo has made it seem larger than life, more present and vital than many living people. Look at the face. The eyes are closed, but not in death. This is the sleep of transformation, the moment between one state of being and another. The body is perfectly muscled, idealized, but the expression is deeply human, vulnerable. Michelangelo understood something that takes most people a lifetime to learn, that true strength often lies in accepting our weakness, our mortality. The surface of the marble is like silk under this gentle lighting. Michelangelo spent months polishing each curve, each subtle gradation, from shadow to highlight. He once said that he didn't create his sculptures, he simply freed them from the stone where they were already waiting. Standing here, looking at the impossible vitality of this figure, you can almost believe him. Walk around to the back. See how Michelangelo has left some areas deliberately rough, unfinished. These areas are called non finito, and they're not signs of incomplete work, but conscious artistic choices. The rough stone reminds us that this figure is emerging from raw matter, being born from the earth itself. The silence here is different from the painted galleries. Stone absorbs sound differently than canvas, creates a hush that feels ancient, geological. These sculptures have been silent for centuries, and they've learned to use that silence, to let it become part of their expression. Here's Canova's Psyche revived by Cupid's kiss, and I want you to prepare yourself for something extraordinary. This sculpture captures a single moment, the instant when Psyche awakens from death-like sleep to find Cupid bending over her. The marble has been carved so thin in places that light passes through it, making Psyche's skin seem to glow from within. Look at their faces. How Canova has captured that first moment of recognition, of returned love. Psyche's hand reaches up to caress Cupid's face, and you can feel the electricity of that touch, even though it's carved from cold stone. This is marble transformed into emotion, geological time compressed into a heartbeat of human feeling. The way the light plays across their intertwined bodies creates shadows that seem to move as we move, making the sculpture appear to breathe, to live. Canova worked on this piece for over 3 years, and every day he carved, he was trying to capture not just the appearance of love, but its essential energy, its transformative power. We're moving now into the heart of French artistic achievement, where color becomes revolution and brushstrokes become manifestos. Our footsteps carry us through centuries of changing styles, changing philosophies, changing ways of seeing the world itself. The air here seems charged with creative energy, with the ghosts of artistic debates and breakthrough moments. These are the walls where Impressionism was born, where traditional academic art met its rebellious children, where the entire course of Western art changed direction forever. Here is Delacroix's Liberty leading the people, and even in this subdued evening light, it blazes with revolutionary fire. The painting is enormous, nearly 9 feet tall, and Liberty herself dominates the composition like a goddess of change itself. But notice how Delacroix has made her simultaneously mythical and earthy, bare-breasted and beautiful, but also strong, determined, real. Look at her face. This isn't an idealized classical beauty, but a woman of the people, someone who has lived and struggled and chosen to lead. Her expression combines determination with compassion, strength with vulnerability. Delacroix spent months studying the faces of working-class women in Paris to get this expression exactly right. The flag she carries is painted with such energy that it seems to snap in an invisible wind. The red, white, and blue of the French tricolor blend and separate in brushstrokes that you can see from across the room. This isn't the smooth, invisible brushwork of academic painting, but something raw, immediate, alive with the energy of creation itself. Stand close to the painting now. See how Delacroix built up the color in layers, how each brushstroke serves both to describe form and to carry emotional weight. The technique he developed here would influence generations of artists, from the Impressionists to Van Gogh to the abstract expressionists. The silence around this painting feels expectant, charged. In the daylight hours, visitors often rush past it on their way to see the Mona Lisa. But here, in the evening quiet, you can feel its power, its call to transformation, its belief in the possibility of change. Moving deeper into the French collection, we encounter the Impressionists, those rebels who dared to leave their studios and paint what they actually saw, rather than what academic tradition told them they should see. Here's Monet's Impression Sunrise, the painting that gave the entire movement its name. In this soft evening light, you can see how revolutionary Monet's approach really was. Instead of carefully blended tones and invisible brushstrokes, he applied paint in quick, visible strokes that captured not just the appearance of light on water, but the feeling of a particular moment, a specific quality of dawn light that exists for only a few minutes each day. Look at how he painted the reflection of the sun on the water, not as a mirror image, but as broken patches of orange and gold that dance and shimmer even in stillness. Monet understood that water is never still, light is never constant, and art should reflect this constant change rather than trying to freeze it into academic perfection. The painting is small, intimate, painted quickly to capture a fleeting effect, but its impact was enormous. When it was first exhibited in 1874, critics mocked it as unfinished, calling it mere wallpaper in its embryonic state. Now we see it as one of the first truly modern paintings, the beginning of art's long journey away from representation and toward expression. Our path through time continues now, into the ancient world, where art served gods whose names we're still learning to pronounce correctly, where beauty was inseparable from magic, from power, from the mysterious forces that govern human destiny. The Roman galleries stretch before us in magnificent succession, filled with emperors frozen in marble immortality, with gods and goddesses whose worship ended 15 centuries ago, but whose beauty remains as compelling as ever. Our footsteps ring differently on these floors, creating echoes that seem to carry across millennia. Here is the Venus de Milo, perhaps the most famous armless woman in history. She stands in perfect contrapposto, her weight shifted to one leg, in that classical pose that makes marble seem to move, seem to live. The sculpture was discovered on the Greek island of Milos in 1820, buried in the ruins of an ancient gymnasium, and she has been teaching us about beauty ever since. Look at her face, serene, confident, with that slight smile that suggests she knows secrets we can only guess at. This isn't the individual portraiture of later periods. but the ideal of feminine beauty itself, distilled into marble form. The sculptor who created her wasn't trying to capture one woman, but womanhood itself, the essential feminine principle made visible. Her missing arms have become part of her mystery, part of her power. We don't know what gestures she was making, what objects she might have held. Some scholars believe she was holding an apple, symbol of Venus. Others think she was spinning thread, like the fates who weave human destiny. But perhaps the mystery is better than any answer. Without arms, she becomes pure form, pure presence, undefined by action or attribute. The drapery that flows around her lower body is carved with such skill that you can almost feel its weight, its texture. The marble has been made transparent in places, heavy in others, creating the illusion that cloth is actually clinging to living flesh rather than cold stone. In this evening light, she seems almost alive, almost breathing. The shadows play across her surface in ways that make her appear to shift and move. This is sculpture at its highest achievement, not just the representation of beauty, but beauty itself, made manifest in stone. Walking deeper into the ancient galleries, we encounter treasures that were old when Venus de Milo was carved. Here are Assyrian reliefs that once decorated the palaces of kings, whose names strike fear and wonder in equal measure. Nebuchadnezzar, Sargon, Ashurbanipal, rulers of empires that stretched from the Mediterranean to the Persian Gulf, from the mountains of Armenia to the deserts of Arabia. These reliefs weren't created for contemplation, but for intimidation, to remind visitors to the royal palace of the king's power, his divine mandate to rule. But time has transformed them from instruments of political control into windows, into vanished worlds, into civilizations that achieved remarkable sophistication before fading into historical memory. Look at this relief of winged bulls with human heads, guardian spirits that once protected the entrances to Assyrian palaces. Each figure is nearly 15 feet tall and carved from a single block of limestone. The level of detail is extraordinary. Every feather in the wings is individually carved. Every curl in the beards follows the conventions of Assyrian royal art. But notice something interesting about these figures. They have 5 legs instead of 4. From the front, you see them standing at attention. From the side, you see them walking. The sculptor solved the problem of showing both rest and motion by giving them an extra leg, a solution that seems awkward to our eyes, but made perfect sense in the visual logic of ancient Mesopotamia. Our journey through time brings us now to an age when art served primarily as prayer, when every brushstroke was an act of devotion, when beauty was understood as a reflection of divine perfection. The medieval galleries of the Louvre hold treasures that were created not for earthly kings, but for the King of Kings, works that were meant to lift the soul toward heaven. The lighting here is especially gentle, protective of these ancient panels and manuscripts that have survived wars, revolutions, and the simple passage of centuries. Many of these works were created by anonymous monks and nuns, artists who saw their creativity as a form of worship, who signed their works not with their names, but with prayers. Here is a remarkable ivory panel from the 11th century, carved with the scenes from the life of Christ. The ivory has aged to a warm honey color, and in this soft evening light, the figures seem to glow from within. Each scene is compressed into a small space, but the artist has managed to convey enormous emotional depth through gesture and expression alone. Look at this scene of the crucifixion. Christ's face is serene, accepting, while Mary and John express their grief through the language of medieval art. Hands raised to faces, bodies curved in sorrow. The artist who carved this panel understood that art could carry spiritual truths that words alone could not express. The technique required to carve ivory to this level of detail is extraordinary. Ivory is a difficult material. Too much pressure and it splits, too little and it doesn't hold detail. This artist spent months, perhaps years, learning to read the grain of the tusk, to work with its natural structure rather than against it. These medieval artists worked without perspective as we understand it, without naturalistic proportions or realistic light sources. But they weren't primitive or unskilled. They were working in a different visual language, one where size indicated spiritual importance rather than physical distance, where gold backgrounds represented the divine light of heaven rather than earthly space. Here's an illuminated manuscript page from the 13th century, and I want you to look at it closely. Every letter has been formed by hand with a quill pen, every decoration painted with pigments that were more precious than gold. The blue you see here is genuine ultramarine, made from lapis lazuli imported from Afghanistan. The red is vermilion, made from cinnabar. The gold is actual gold leaf, applied with brushes made from single sable hairs. The text is in Latin, of course, and tells the story of the Annunciation. But look at the margins. They're filled with fantastic creatures, playful monkeys, stylized leaves and flowers that seem to dance around the sacred words. Medieval artists understood that even the most serious spiritual subjects could accommodate moments of joy, of humor, of pure delight in the act of creation. This manuscript page took perhaps a month to complete. 1 month for a single page. The monk who illuminated it probably began each day's work with prayer, asking for guidance in his sacred task, and when he finished, he probably ended with another prayer, offering his work to the glory of God. The silence around these medieval works feels different from the silence elsewhere in the museum. It's contemplative, meditative, charged with the accumulated prayers of centuries. These works were created by people who believed that beauty was a gift from God, that artistic skill was a sacred responsibility, that their paintings and sculptures and manuscripts would outlast their earthly lives and continue to inspire devotion for generations to come. We're climbing now, our footsteps creating a rhythm on the marble stairs of the Grand Escalier, each step carrying us higher, both literally and metaphorically, through the accumulated artistic achievements of human civilization. The staircase itself is a work of art, designed to make visitors feel they're ascending into realms of pure beauty, pure inspiration. The walls around us are decorated with frescoes and sculptures that transform this transitional space into a gallery in its own right. Look up at the ceiling. Those painted figures seem to float in gilded clouds, looking down at us with benevolent expressions that suggest we're being welcomed into a sacred space, a temple dedicated to human creativity. Our footsteps echo in a different way here, bouncing off the curved walls and domed ceiling to create a symphony of movement. Listen to that sound. It's the same echo that has accompanied millions of visitors over the decades, each person bringing their own hopes and expectations to this encounter with great art. The handrail we're touching has been polished smooth by countless hands, warmed by countless palms. Think of all the people who have climbed these same stairs. Artists coming to study the masters, scholars researching their dissertations, tourists from every corner of the world, children experiencing great art for the first time, elderly visitors making perhaps their final pilgrimage to beauty. From this vantage point, looking back down the stairs, you can see how the architects designed this space to create a sense of ceremony, of ritual transformation. You don't simply enter the upper galleries. You ascend to them. You earn your place there through the physical act of climbing, of rising above the everyday world into realms of higher beauty. The lighting changes as we climb, becoming softer, more golden, more reverent. This isn't accidental. Every aspect of this staircase was designed to prepare visitors for what they would encounter in the galleries above, to put them into the proper frame of mind for communion with great art. Halfway up, there's a landing where you can pause and look back at where we've been. From here, the entrance hall seems far below us, and the galleries we visited feel like chapters in a book we're reading, each one adding to our understanding of the human story told through art. The sculptures that line the staircase are arranged chronologically, so as we climb, we're also moving forward through time. Here's a Roman copy of a Greek original. There's a medieval relief. Higher up, Renaissance bronze. And at the top, works from more recent centuries. It's a visual timeline of human artistic achievement, compressed into the space of a single staircase. We've reached the Apollo Gallery now, one of the most magnificent rooms in the entire Louvre, a space that was designed to rival the Hall of Mirrors at Versailles, to demonstrate that art could create environments of unimaginable splendor. The ceiling soars above us, covered in painted scenes that seem to open directly onto heaven itself. This is where the French crown jewels were once displayed, where kings and queens walked among treasures that represented not just wealth, but the divine right to rule, the belief that earthly power was a reflection of celestial order. The very air here seems to shimmer with accumulated luxury, with centuries of reverence for beauty as the highest expression of royal authority. Look up at the ceiling. Charles Lebrun spent years painting these scenes, creating a visual poem about the triumph of the sun, God Apollo over the forces of darkness and chaos. Every figure is perfectly proportioned according to academic principles, every color carefully chosen to create harmonious relationships across the enormous expanse of the ceiling. But notice how the painted architecture seems to extend the real architecture of the room. Where do the actual walls end and the painted illusion begin? Lebrun was a master of trompe-l'œil, the art of visual deception, and he used these techniques to make this room seem larger, more magnificent, more ethereal than any earthly space could possibly be. The light here is extraordinary, filtered through tall windows that face west toward the setting sun. In the late afternoon, the entire room would have been bathed in golden light that made the gilded details blaze like fire, that transformed the painted ceiling into a vision of celestial glory. Even now, in the gentle evening illumination, you can sense something of that intended effect. The parquet floor beneath our feet is an intricate pattern of different woods, arranged in geometric designs that mirror the patterns on the ceiling. Every element of this room was designed to work in harmony with every other element, to create a total environment of beauty. a space where art wasn't simply displayed, but became the very fabric of experience. Walk slowly through this gallery. Let your eyes adjust to its splendor. This isn't just a room, it's a manifesto, a statement about the power of human creativity to transform space into something transcendent, something that lifts the spirit and inspires the imagination. In cases along the walls are displayed some of the finest examples of decorative arts ever created. Clocks that are sculptures, furniture that is architecture, jewelry that captures starlight in precious metals and gems. These objects remind us that art isn't just paintings and sculptures, but extends to every aspect of human life, every object that human hands can touch and transform. Here's a clock made by André Charles Boulle in the 17th century, a timepiece that is also a meditation on time itself. The bronze figures represent the hours, dancing around a dial that marks not just minutes and seconds, but the eternal dance between order and entropy, between human time and cosmic time. The craftsmanship required to create such an object is almost unimaginable by contemporary standards. Every bronze figure was cast separately, then chased and gilded by hand. The ebony and tortoiseshell marquetry required months of careful cutting and fitting, and all of this incredible skill was devoted to an object whose primary function was simply to tell time. Except that in the hands of a master craftsman, telling time becomes an act of poetry. We're entering now into one of the Louvre's great painting galleries, a long hall where masterworks hang in magnificent succession, each one a window into a different moment of human creativity, a different vision of what art could accomplish, what beauty could reveal about the human condition. Our footsteps are softer here on the carpeted floor, creating barely a whisper as we move from painting to painting. The acoustics are designed to encourage quiet conversation, intimate observation, the kind of focused attention that great art rewards with revelation and insight. The lighting here is carefully calibrated to protect these priceless canvases while allowing us to see them at their best. Each painting has its own microclimate, its own invisible envelope of controlled temperature and humidity that helps ensure it will survive for future generations to discover and admire. Here is Watteau's The Pilgrimage to Cythera, and I want you to approach it slowly. Let your eyes adjust to its delicate colors and subtle composition. Watteau painted this scene of elegant couples journeying to the island of love, and every figure, every gesture, every fold of silk or lace was painted with the most refined technique imaginable. Look at the way Watteau has captured different moments in the couple's journey. On the right, hesitation and courtship. In the center, decision and commitment. On the left, departure and adventure. It's a narrative painted in the language of gesture and expression, a story told through the poetry of human movement. The colors are extraordinary. Soft pinks and golds and silvery blues that seem to glow from within the canvas. Watteau mixed his paints with incredible subtlety, creating colors that exist nowhere in nature, but somehow seem more natural than nature itself. This is painting raised to the level of music, pure harmony made visible. Stand close to the painting and look at the brushwork. Every stroke serves multiple purposes, describing form, capturing light, conveying emotion. Watteau painted wet on wet, blending colors directly on the canvas to create those soft transitions between tones. The technique required perfect timing. Too early and the colors would muddy, too late and they wouldn't blend at all. Moving on through the gallery, we encounter Chardin's still lifes, paintings that find infinite depth and meaning in the simplest subjects: a piece of fruit, a copper pot, a loaf of bread. Chardin understood something profound about art, that it wasn't the subject that mattered, but the quality of attention the artist brought to that subject. Here's his painting of a ray fish, and at first glance it might seem like an odd choice for artistic treatment. But look closer. See how Chardin has found beauty in this humble creature, how he's used the play of light and shadow to transform a simple kitchen scene into something almost sacred, almost ceremonial. The paint surface here is remarkably thick in places, built up in layers that create actual texture, actual weight on the canvas. This is called impasto technique, and Chardin used it to make his paintings seem more than visual. They become almost tactile, almost edible. You can feel the weight of that copper pot, the coolness of that marble surface, the softness of that bread crust. Chardin worked slowly, sometimes spending weeks on a single painting. He would arrange and rearrange his objects until the composition felt exactly right, until every element was in perfect relationship with every other element. Then he would paint with incredible care and patience, building up the surface slowly, allowing each layer to dry before adding the next. The result is painting that seems effortless, but represents the highest level of technical mastery. Chardin made the difficult look easy, the complex look simple. His paintings reward long-looking, careful attention, the kind of slow observation that our fast-paced world rarely encourages, but that great art always demands. We're moving now into one of the Louvre's great sculpture courtyards, where natural light filters down through glass ceilings to create constantly changing patterns of light and shadow on marble and bronze figures that have waited centuries for this illumination. The acoustics here are different again, more open, more resonant, with sounds bouncing off hard surfaces to create an environment that feels both intimate and grand, both ancient and timeless. Our footsteps ring differently on the stone floor, creating rhythms that seem to wake up the sculptures, to remind them that they're not alone in their eternal vigil. This courtyard was once open to the sky, and some of these sculptures were originally created to be viewed in natural light, to change their expression and mood as the sun moved across the heavens. Even now, with the protective glass ceiling, something of that original intention survives in the way light moves across their surfaces throughout the day. Here is Rodin's The Kiss, and even in this subdued evening light, you can feel the passion that the sculptor captured in marble. The figures are life-sized, and their embrace seems so real, so immediate, that you might expect them to break apart and look at you with surprise at being observed in such an intimate moment. Look at how Rodin has carved the marble to different degrees of finish. Paolo's back is polished to silk smoothness, while the base of the sculpture remains rough, unfinished. This contrast creates a sense that the figures are emerging from raw stone, being born from the earth itself through the power of love. The way the two figures support each other creates a perfect balance, a sense of two individual beings becoming one unified form. Rodin understood that sculpture isn't just about representing the human body, but about capturing human emotion in 3 dimensions, making feeling visible and tangible. Walk around the sculpture slowly. Notice how your perspective changes their relationship, their story. From one side, Paolo seems to be leaning down to meet Francesca. From another angle, she appears to be rising up to meet him. This is sculpture that lives in time as well as space, that tells its story differently depending on where you stand. When you look, the marble itself seems to breathe in this soft light. Rodin chose this particular block of Carrara marble for its fine grain, its ability to hold the most delicate details. When you look at Francesca's hand on Paolo's shoulder, you can see individual knuckles, the subtle depressions between fingers, even the suggestion of pulse beneath the skin. Moving deeper into the courtyard, we encounter older voices, ancient conversations carved in stone. Here's a Roman sarcophagus from the 2nd century, decorated with scenes from mythology that once comforted the grieving by reminding them that death was simply another transformation, another chapter in the eternal human story. The relief carvings wrap around the entire sarcophagus, creating a continuous narrative that you have to walk around to read completely. This isn't art meant to be viewed from a single vantage point, but art that demands participation, movement, engagement. The Romans understood that some stories are too complex to tell in a single image, that some truths require time and motion to unfold. Look at this scene of Dionysus and his followers. The god of wine and transformation leads a procession of figures that seem to dance even in stone. Each figure is carved with individual personality, individual expression. This wasn't generic decoration, but specific portraiture. Real people transformed into mythological characters for their eternal journey. The craftsmanship required to create such detailed relief work is extraordinary. The sculptors used dozens of different chisels, each one designed for a specific type of cut, a particular texture or detail. They worked from detailed drawings, but the final sculpture required hundreds of decisions, thousands of individual cuts, each one irreversible, each one contributing to the final effect. In this evening light, the shadows between the figures create depth and drama that would have been even more pronounced when the sarcophagus stood in its original location, probably in a family mausoleum where oil lamps or candles would have created dancing shadows that made the carved figures seem almost alive. Our path leads us now into a quieter wing, where medieval tapestries hang in climate-controlled dignity, their colors still vibrant after centuries, their stories still compelling to anyone willing to take the time to read their complex visual language. Tapestry is perhaps the most labor-intensive art form ever developed. Each one of these works represents years of collaborative effort, teams of weavers working from detailed cartoons to create images in wool and silk thread. The largest tapestries required up to a decade to complete, with multiple generations of craftspeople contributing to their creation. Here is one of the Lady and the Unicorn tapestries, woven in the late 15th century, and I want you to approach it with the same careful attention you would give to a great painting. Every detail was planned, every color chosen for its symbolic meaning, every figure positioned to contribute to the overall narrative. Look at the lady in the center. She's dressed in the height of medieval fashion, her gown flowing in impossible folds that demonstrate the weaver's absolute mastery of their craft. But notice her expression, serene, mysterious, suggesting inner knowledge that we can only guess at. She exists in that eternal medieval present, where symbolic truth matters more than realistic representation. The unicorn beside her is captured at the moment of surrender, laying his head in her lap in a gesture that medieval viewers would have understood as representing the taming of wild nature by pure spirit. But look at the unicorn's eye. There's something wild there still, something that suggests this surrender is temporary, that magical creatures can never be completely domesticated. The background is filled with the flowers and plants, each one chosen for its symbolic meaning. Roses for love, lilies for purity, oak leaves for strength, violets for humility. This isn't just decoration, but a complex language that educated medieval viewers could read like text. Every element contributes to the overall meaning, the larger story about the relationship between the natural and spiritual worlds. The weaving technique itself is extraordinary. The finest threads are finer than human hair, and they're interwoven so tightly that even centuries later the images remain crisp and clear. The colors come from dyes that were the most precious substances of their age. True red from cochineal insects imported from the New World, blue from woad and indigo, gold from actual gold thread wound around silk cores. Stand close to the tapestry and look at how the weavers created the illusion of three-dimensional form through careful gradations of color and tone. They understood that light falls differently on rounded surfaces than on flat ones, and they translated this understanding into thread, creating volume and depth through pure craftsmanship. The silence around these tapestries feels particularly profound. They were originally created for castle halls and noble chambers, spaces where they provided both insulation and decoration, where their stories would have been familiar to everyone who saw them. Now they hang in museum quiet, but they still carry the weight of those original stories, those medieval dreams of chivalry and romance and spiritual transformation. Moving through this gallery is like reading a book written in wool and silk, each tapestry a chapter in the larger story of medieval imagination. Here's a hunting scene, there a religious allegory, beyond that, a celebration of courtly love. Together they create a comprehensive picture of how an entire civilization understood itself, its values, its relationship to the divine and natural worlds. We're entering now into one of the Louvre's newer wings, dedicated to the artistic traditions of the Islamic world, where beauty was understood as a reflection of divine order, where geometric patterns achieve levels of complexity that seem to approach the infinite. The lighting here is especially warm and golden, reminiscent of the desert sunlight that illuminated many of these works when they were first created. Our footsteps are muffled by carpet in some areas, creating an atmosphere of contemplative quiet that feels appropriate for these objects that were often created as aids to meditation and prayer. Here is a magnificent mihrab, a prayer niche that once indicated the direction of Mecca in a mosque in Damascus. The entire surface is covered in ceramic tiles, arranged in patterns that seem to pulse and flow with mathematical precision. Look closely at any section, and you'll see perfect symmetry, perfect balance. But step back, and the overall effect is of movement, of energy, of patterns that seem to continue beyond the borders of the object itself. Islamic artists developed these geometric patterns as a form of spiritual discipline. The mathematical precision required to create such complex designs was understood as a way of approaching divine perfection. of creating earthly reflections of celestial order. Every line, every curve, every intersection was calculated according to principles that connected human craftsmanship with cosmic harmony. The colors here are extraordinary: deep blues and brilliant greens, and warm golds that seem to glow from within. These tiles were fired in kilns, heated to incredibly high temperatures, and the glazes were formulated according to closely guarded secrets, passed down through generations of ceramic masters. Some of these blue glazes contain actual ground lapis lazuli, making them literally precious beyond measure. Stand in front of this mihrab for several minutes and let your eyes follow the patterns. You'll notice something remarkable. The longer you look, the more complex the relationships become, the more connections you see between different elements. This isn't accidental. Islamic artists designed these patterns to reward sustained attention, to reveal their secrets slowly to those willing to take the time to really see. Here's a manuscript page from a 13th century Quran, written in gold ink on deep blue paper. The calligraphy is so perfect, it seems almost mechanical. But remember that every letter was formed by hand with a reed pen, every curve and flourish controlled by years of training and spiritual discipline. Arabic calligraphy isn't just writing, it's visual music, a way of making the sacred words of the Quran beautiful to the eye, as well as meaningful to the mind. The calligrapher who wrote this page spent years learning to control his hand so perfectly that he could create letters of absolute consistency, absolute beauty, worthy of carrying the word of God. Look at how the golden letters seem to float on the blue background, creating a sense of celestial text written across a night sky. The proportions of each letter follow mathematical principles, developed over centuries, creating a visual rhythm that mirrors the poetic rhythm of the Arabic language itself. The margins are decorated with geometric patterns that echo the shapes of the letters, creating a unified composition where text and decoration become one seamless whole. This is art in service of the divine, where every element serves not just aesthetic, but spiritual purposes. In cases around the room are displayed objects from daily life that were elevated to art through the skill and devotion of their creators. Here's a brass incense burner inlaid with silver calligraphy. There, a ceramic bowl decorated with poetry written in flowing script. These objects remind us that Islamic culture saw no separation between sacred and secular art, that beauty was understood as a divine gift that should permeate every aspect of human life. We're approaching now the heart of the museum, the great hall where all paths converge, where the architectural magnificence of the palace itself becomes part of the artistic experience. The space soars above us, supported by columns that were already ancient when Napoleon walked these floors, lit by chandeliers that have witnessed centuries of human aspiration and achievement. Our footsteps echo differently here, creating sounds that seem to awaken the very walls, to remind the building itself that it continues to serve its highest purpose as a temple to human creativity. The acoustics were designed to make visitors feel both humbled by the grandeur and elevated by their participation in this ongoing celebration of artistic achievement. From this central point, you can look in any direction and see doorways leading to different worlds, different centuries, different ways of understanding what art can accomplish. To the east, ancient civilizations. To the west, modern masters. North, the intimate world of drawings and prints. South, the monumental scale of sculpture and architecture. This is where the museum's geographic and chronological logic becomes clear, where you can understand how human creativity has flowed across continents and centuries, how influences have traveled along trade routes and conquest paths, how artistic ideas have crossed cultural boundaries to create new syntheses, new possibilities. The light here changes throughout the day, filtered through tall windows and reflected off polished surfaces to create an ever-shifting environment that makes familiar works look new, that reveals different aspects of the collection as the hours pass. In this evening light, everything takes on a golden quality, a warmth that makes even the most formal academic pieces seem intimate and personal. Stand in the center of this space for a moment and just listen. Even in this quiet hour, the building itself seems to hum with accumulated energy, with the presence of all the visitors who have stood in this same spot over the decades. All the conversations and revelations and moments of recognition that have taken place here. This is what the great museums offer that no reproduction, no digital archive, no virtual tour can replace. The sense of being physically present with objects that have survived across centuries, that carry in their very substance the touch of human hands, the mark of human consciousness, the weight of human aspiration. Think about the journey we've taken tonight, from ancient Egypt through medieval Europe, from Islamic geometric perfection to Renaissance humanism, from classical idealism to romantic revolution. We've traced the entire development of human artistic consciousness, seen how each generation has built upon the achievements of its predecessors, while finding new ways to express eternal truths about beauty, meaning, and the human condition. But we're not just observers of this history, we're participants in it. Every time someone looks at a work of art with genuine attention, with openness to its possibilities, they become part of the ongoing conversation between past and present, between creator and viewer, between human aspiration and achieved form. Our journey through the Louvre is drawing toward its close, but I want to take you to one final space, a gallery that many visitors miss in their rush to see the famous works, but which may be the most important of all, the gallery of drawings and preparatory studies, where you can see the minds of great artists at work. Here are Leonardo's sketches, Michelangelo's studies, Dürer's precise observations of the natural world. These aren't finished masterpieces, but glimpses into the creative process itself, windows into moments of discovery and experimentation that led to some of the greatest achievements in human art. Look at this drawing by Leonardo. It's a study for a painting that was never completed, but in some ways it's more revealing than any finished work. You can see him thinking on paper, working out problems of anatomy and composition, trying different approaches to the same challenge. The lines are alive with energy, with the excitement of discovery. Drawing is perhaps the most honest of all art forms. You can't hide behind color or surface effects. It's just the artist, the tool, and the paper, engaged in direct conversation. When you look at a master drawing, you're seeing the artist's hand moving, their mind working, their vision developing in real time. Here's a Rembrandt sketch, just a few lines of chalk on paper, but somehow he's captured not just the appearance, but the essential character of his subject. This is drawing at its highest level, the ability to suggest everything while showing very little, to make a few marks carry the weight of complete representation. The silence in this gallery is particularly profound. These drawings were never meant for public display. They were private conversations between artists and their materials, working documents in the ongoing process of creation. Now they're preserved behind glass, but they still carry something of that original intimacy, that sense of being present at moments of artistic discovery. Moving through this final gallery, you realize that what we've been seeing tonight isn't just a collection of beautiful objects, but a record of human consciousness itself, a visual history of how people have understood themselves and their world across thousands of years. Every painting, every sculpture, every decorative object we've encountered represents someone's attempt to make sense of their experience, to find meaning in existence, to create something beautiful that would outlast their own mortal life. And in preserving these works, in studying them and sharing them, we continue that ancient human project of creating meaning through beauty. The light is growing softer now as our evening tour draws toward its end. Soon, the security systems will activate. The temperature will drop slightly for overnight conservation, and these artworks will settle into their patient wait for tomorrow's visitors. But something has happened during our time together that will outlast this evening, that will continue long after we leave this building. We have engaged in the kind of deep-looking, slow contemplation and quiet conversation that great art was created to inspire. We've allowed these works to speak to us in their own voice, at their own pace, without the hurry and distraction of the crowded daytime hours. As we make our way back toward the entrance, our footsteps retracing the path we took hours ago, I want you to think about what we've accomplished tonight. In a world that increasingly demands instant gratification, immediate answers, and constant stimulation, we've practiced the ancient art of patience, of sustained attention, of deep seeing. The artworks we've visited tonight have been waiting for centuries for viewers willing to give them the time they deserve, willing to look past the surface to discover the layers of meaning and beauty that careful observation reveals. By moving slowly, by listening to the silence, by allowing ourselves to be present with these works, rather than rushing past them, we've participated in the kind of experience that great art was created to provide. Think about the conversations we've had, not just between us, but between past and present, between different cultures and civilizations, between the eternal human questions and the specific answers that each artist found in their own time and place. These conversations continue long after we leave the museum, continuing to enrich our understanding and deepen our appreciation for the complexity and beauty of human experience. The security guard is waiting for us now at the entrance, keys ready to lock the doors behind us as we return to the contemporary world outside these walls. But something of what we've experienced tonight goes with us, a deeper appreciation for slowness, for careful looking, for the kind of attention that reveals beauty in unexpected places. The heavy doors open one last time, and the sounds of the city rush in to replace the contemplative quiet we've been sharing. But listen, even in the urban noise, there are rhythms and patterns, moments of unexpected beauty, opportunities for the kind of seeing that great art teaches us to practice. The street lights create their own patterns of light and shadow. The architecture around us tells its own stories about human aspiration and achievement. The world itself becomes a gallery when we look at it with the eyes that art has taught us to use. Our private tour of the Louvre is ending, but the conversation continues. Every time you encounter something beautiful, every moment you choose to look more carefully rather than rushing past, every occasion when you allow art to speak to you in its own voice and at its own pace, you're continuing the experience we've shared tonight until we meet again in another gallery, in another quiet hour, when great art waits patiently for visitors willing to receive its gifts of beauty, meaning, and the profound satisfaction that comes from truly seeing. Sleep well and dream of golden galleries where time moves slowly and beauty waits eternally for those who have learned to truly look.